Another anti-bullshit man response video. Yay. Section B. This is gonna take forever. Anyway, but you know, maybe there'll be something interesting. I thought of something interesting just thinking about this bullshit, so you know, so it's gotta be worth something. Anyway, alright, so this is called Central Incongruities Between Justice Maximization and Harm Minimization. Wow. Look, if you know, the end game is to, you know, just do this straight line thing to the purest answer, which is fail safe, which is don't play with it. It's too messy, too dangerous. Stop gambling. Yeah, I mean, it's just eradicating a kind of gambling and just doing it in the straightest line way. So, I mean, sure, you can metaphor it to a million things. You know, football game, and you're at the, whatever, 10-yard line, or even the 20-yard line, who cares? It's just whatever. And, you know, you're sort of like society has progressed. We've all, not all of us, but, you know, a large hunk of society has sort of figured out that having kids isn't the most fun in the world. There are other things to do with yourself, and there's interesting things to do, and blah, blah, blah. And most people have sort of caught on to that. They still see some sort of purpose or function in the human race doing something, I guess, mostly. But it's kind of a vague and mushy description of purpose. They're not, you know, running after some god sheep. You know, they're not following the head god anymore too much. But they still have some vague notions of, you know, directionality. Well, anyway, the point is we're there, and we're just trying to come up with a strategy to do this little end game thing before the whistle blows. Okay, I mean, the 2-minute warning is happened, so you got this 2 minutes left. You got to come up with a play. You got to get from here to the end, and you know, whether you do an end run or you do a quarterback sneak, or you know, lots of ways to do it. And you can argue about that, but the end game is still getting to the goal, which is, yeah, let's get this done. Let's stop making a mess. And so he's just, you know, so anyway, contradictory statements again. So he's again implying some sort of, you know, it's not even so much that my philosophy is somehow, you know, thoughtless or undetailed or inspecific or reckless, or, you know, that somehow if you pick it apart enough, you'll see that it's fundamentally broken. Well, it's not fundamentally broken. It's broken in the language nuance, and yes, the imperfection of extemporal, you know, expressions of the philosophy. And yes, I didn't go to this. I didn't do this to it. This, whatever this is. Which I could argue, when done badly, you know, isn't of any more value than, you know, the free thinking idea. You know, the free. See, saying free thinking, right? This is just kind of it's just an imprecision in my word usage there, because I don't imply that my thinking is free. I just mean that I'm in a medium where my brain has to do it on the fly. It has to do it now. It can't refine it and perfect it. You know, so anyway, so yeah, but this is just so nitpicky and bullshitty from AntiBullshitMan. This is just bullshit from AntiBullshitMan. Anyway, alright, so he says these two statements are the contradictory statements. Alright, it doesn't matter who suffers, the enemy is suffering itself. Well, I think that's just the most brilliant quote ever. I mean, it's almost as brilliant as precious commodities being controlled by crude forces. I mean, it's just so simple and so fucking true. You know, I mean, really, it doesn't really matter who the pianos fall on. It just matters that pianos are falling. I mean, this just doesn't. It just look. I've said it before, but I mean, pain is pain. If it isn't going to accomplish some grander good, you know, like deterring criminals, or showing them, giving them what they deserve, if it's not going to accomplish anything, it just doesn't matter who's having it. Now, if you want to talk about justice in the context where it matters, where what you do will discourage future crimes, well, that's fine. But this statement isn't in that context. It's just pointing out that when you really look at it, when you examine it, it's just burned down trees, and it just doesn't matter what trees it is. It just doesn't. There's just no point in the guilty are guilty. The guilt doesn't have anything to do with the badness of the suffering caused by their guilt, their crime. The suffering is the problem. Assigning blame is useless unless you're going to create some sort of productive reduction in suffering by apportioning it appropriately, by giving it to the proper victim, the better victim. And so that's my second statement, which is, since we know that the future suffering will regrettably happen to some of us, it should happen to those who are willing to impose unnecessary risk on others for no reason other than I want. So now this statement, I've said it a lot of different ways. I've just basically said that, if pianos have to fall, they should fall on the people who put them up there. And so assigning cause is always a little bit tricky, right? Because you could say, well, there's one person who paid the guy to push the piano up. So is it the guy who paid the guy to push the piano up? Or is it the guy who, because he was just throwing rocks out his window, he hit the rope that's holding up the piano and the piano fell? I mean, whose fault that the piano falls? Is it the guy who put the piano in the air, or is it the guy who cut the rope? So, that could be a very interesting conversation, but I frankly kind of just think, generally speaking, the fault lies with the asshole who created the first cause. The first cause is kind of the main cause. All the other causes they'd only have opportunity to fuck up because you created the opportunity for them to fuck up, kind of thing. So I tend to say the piano should fall on the first causer, even if their crime was the most inadvertent, in the sense that they didn't have, let's say they didn't have a malicious intent, but they had a clear understanding of recklessness. So it's like the drunk driver scenario or something. You could create some sort of circumstance where a guy gets in his car drunk, he knows he's drunk, he knows he's impaired when he's drunk, and he just says, well, I can get away with it, it's okay, no big deal. And and then there's, I'm trying to think of some other, creating some secondary cause, which would be somebody who's speeding, a speeder. Okay, so there was a drunk and a speeder, and now they interact with each other, but don't collide with each other, but they interact with each other, and as a cause of that interaction, okay, a little kid gets run over. I mean, whose fault is it? Is it the drunk? Is it the speeders? Because without both of them, it wouldn't have happened, but clearly without the drunk, the speeder would have been okay. So, well, I'm just saying, it gets a little complicated. And he, apparently he's saying, I am not allowing for complications. I'm allowing for that. I'm just saying, if you want to take the time to dissect all of these equations, you can probably come down to a good rational basis for saying, okay, this guy's more guilty than that guy. And you could find a cause that's more first cause. I mean, who paid to have the piano put in the air? Because nothing happens if nobody puts a piano in the air. All right. So yeah, I didn't highlight anything else here for a little while. But he's just griping, like I said, as if there's a conflict here somewhere, and there isn't. Alright, will inmendham clarify once and for all where his notional value absolutism fits once adjusted to these perfectly regular and frequent scenarios. So he had some sort of scenario with the octomom, you know, and scenario 2, should you have it coming, reckless, arrogant, I don't know what this, you know, I forget. Whereas the bodybuilder rightfully condemns her misdeeds. Children, I don't know why. I don't remember. I guess it was just too convoluted, so I gave up. So I guess I won't. Yeah. I don't. I'm just saying that any scenario you create, I'm just saying, if you want to take enough time to dissect it, you can find something that's more of the cause. And I don't think there's anything. There's no conflict in me saying, look, in a world where there is deterrence, where deterrence can still work, okay, punishing people who are guilty is probably a great idea. In a world where deterrence doesn't work, you know, who you punish sort of gets adjusted to people who aren't the most guilty, but again, who are the most essential in terms of the attitude that created the problem. So I guess I'm just saying it's like, who do you blame? The gambler or the people who voted to legalize gambling, knowing that's going to create the gambler who's going to lose his house? You know, that kind of thing. But whatever. Like I said, I just don't. These two statements are different statements. One is about, like, oh, you know, let's say everything's going to get, you know, the end game is to reduce the suffering itself. So again, I don't really care about these circumstances. I'm just saying there is a certain emotional gratification and satisfaction in the idea that there would be some sort of justice, that these assholes who create risk, who create vulnerability, who make the problem possible, should have some appreciation for, this is what you created, this is the end result, here's what your risk creates, and now it's on you. The piano is on your ass, suffocating you, okay? And that it just should be that way. But the joke is, it sort of is, because you could add a third thing here and then create even a higher contradiction by your silly nitpickyism, where I would argue that, you know, essentially these people are ourselves. We can pretend that we're different enough that it matters, but it really doesn't matter. You know, when you do something to open the door of risk to the future, you are just kicking your own nuts. Those victims are going to be just as conscious as you, just as real as you. They might as well be you. There's just not enough of a distinction. And if I've argued, again, if we were talking about some rat maze experiment, people would understand that simple idea, because, yeah, they wouldn't be able to tell the rats apart. You know, they'd all just be rat A, rat B, rat C, rat D. And it really wouldn't matter what rat gets ground up, what rat gets exploded, what rat gets electrocuted. It would be just understood, rat got electrocuted, rat got exploded. And the idea of it would be understood in terms of just that value weight of the explosion or the electrocution, you know, or the nut scraping or whatever the thing happening to the rat is. And it would be understood for its value, for the fact that it just doesn't matter who. Alright, but it certainly does matter to us emotionally, in the sense that it just seems right that if you can't change anything, if the only thing you can change isn't the amount of suffering in the world, and the only thing you can change is who gets the suffering, yeah, it just seems right that it goes to the people who are the causers of it, and that it go to the people who created the first cause, who were most essential to creating the potential for it, and say even the most arrogant in doing that. Like, arrogance and recklessness in a world where you know the dangers of arrogance and recklessness, where you're perfectly aware of the fact of your lack of control, your lack of godly powers, and yet you assigned yourself the role of God. You know, it's like that arrogance should earn you something. When you're arrogant enough to say, I'm better than you, and then you prove yourself not to be more competent, you know, that arrogance should just get you a little extra bonus, you know. So, but whatever. Like I said, I don't see any point in first smashing these statements together, because they don't have to be together. They are a different context. They are kind of a different subject, and there's nothing wrong with them in and of themselves. It's perfectly sensible if you're careful about the context in which you impose on them. And I just think you're abusing the context I use them in for the purposes they were used for. So it just seems like a bullshit move. Alright, so anyway, assuming he wishes to have a fruitful discussion about absolute rights and wrongs with scurrilous thinkers. Whatever. Yeah, you know, whatever. I don't really want to have a discussion about absolute rights and wrongs. I want to have a discussion about, you know, the reasonable boundaries. Certainly that's way on that side of the fence, and that's way on that side of the fence. So absolutes in terms of the extremes, in terms of the margins. But I've often said I don't really care about this crap in the middle, this crap on the fence. This crap on the fence is irrelevant to the game. 90% of the game is going to happen on either side of the fence, and it's just, yeah, it'd be a waste of my time to get to waste my time worrying about what, you know, how we write the absolute statement perfect enough to discriminate between all the little nuanced bullshit on the fence, because it just doesn't matter to the real subject. In my opinion, it is just nitpicking. It has nothing to do with the fundamental value of the policy. I mean, you can have a law against stealing, right? And then you could sit there and say, oh, but what if they're stealing bread to feed their family? Well, that's okay, I guess, right? Except if they're stealing bread to feed their family because they lost all their money at the gambling house, or something like that, you know? If there's always another context to be added, and you can make the scenarios more and more complicated. But again, in some way, it's always going to reduce down to the fact that there's a principle that in most cases is going to be applicable. And absolute is the word sort of has to be qualified, out of its absoluteness, in the sense that it's certainly it's certainly an absolute truth, but you're just basically conceding that you can't always apply it because you don't always have enough information about the exact circumstance to apply it. Your ignorance makes it impossible to come up with the absolute solution. There's still too many vagaries and too many variables that haven't been declared for you to use the absolute math. So you use conditional math. Well, whatever. I don't. Like I said, this is just such bullshit. Anything else would amount to a cop-out. I mean, it's just so fucking irritating. I will not entertain appeals to subsequent contingencies triggered by dark alley assault, and all this other bullshit. So yeah, use something about justice maximization, harm minimization. And again, justice doesn't have any, in my opinion, justice is meaningless, okay, in terms of it only means something if you're going to need it. But the whole point is to not need justice maximization. Create a world where you have consent. You either create a world where you have explicit consent, which is basically you torture yourself. You enslave yourself. You create a clone of yourself, and then put yourself out in the field to be the slave. Or you put yourself in the coal mine to get crushed. Or you put yourself in some other circumstance that is the nature of the abuse that you're taking advantage of. So as long as you're abusing yourself quite overtly, I guess you could argue that it's okay. But again, that doesn't negate the argument that could be made that you don't let retards bash their own brains in with a hammer. So if you can find somebody doing something that overtly stupid, like enslaving themselves, or even cannibalizing themselves, cooking themselves on the Barbie, their clone, and then eating it, you could say, okay, that's too stupid, that's too crazy, and negate consent in that circumstance. Alright, anyway. The neglected specifications also admit of an irrevocable quarrel in measurement between optimization and, de-individuated total well-being. Alright, measurement between optimization of well-being versus, here we go, optimization of average well-being. So de-individualized total well-being versus average well-being. Yeah, I don't know, those sound like the same thing to me. So I don't think there's a quarrel there, but whatever. See, that's just, isn't that the definition of a split hair when I can't tell the difference between the two things on the other side of the versus word? Yeah, I think that's a split hair. Alright, given the voluminous detail I've just qualified here, it's doubtful. Would inmendham betray his net mandate by following suit? So he wants to do with some kind of, he's got some word for his, well, we'll probably find it here somewhere, where he's going to have this consensual utilitarianism or something. I don't know. But yeah, I don't, what's the point? Yeah, I didn't get this part. It was comparing the 50 years from 1900 to 1950 to 1951 to 2000. Well, I don't understand the, I just don't see the point in it. I don't know what he wants to argue about that. Whether it's better to, prevent polio in the people from 1950 to 2000, or prevent influenza for the people before 1950. Well, whatever. Do I really want to do that? Do I really want to sit there and parse that all up and figure out what's the greatest benefit, ending influenza for the people before 1950 or ending polio for the people after 1950? I don't want to do that. Anyway. And then it gets into this non-trivial harm thing, and most gym goers have told me, unlike masochists, they immensely dislike the pain that comes with pumping iron. Alright, so now that we're getting into this argument about when somebody can consent to impose suffering on themselves, and in what circumstance we're allowed to say that's too stupid. I mean, really, is that really worthy of all this crap of an argument? I mean, isn't that more of an argument you have for the fun of it? I mean, I could argue that all sports is just fundamentally psychotic. It's a stupid, idiotic soap opera, hugely expensive to society, of no value. Like gambling and these other things, find something else to entertain you. Okay, this is crap. It's a nonsense, horrid, disgusting, useless waste of human energy. And so I'd say that, yes, obsessive gym goers, I mean, beyond the benefits of, healthy physical maintenance, is stupid. Yeah, that's right. It's small-minded. And that maybe that individual should be optimized to recognize that pumping their brain full of knowledge might be a better thing to be doing with their time. But I'm not for passing any law about it. Because in my world, people won't have to worry about having the psychology that gets off on that crap in the first place. Alright. Insofar as preference utilitarianism is concerned, gym goers' physical hardship is their business regardless. So preference utilitarianism. Well, it's their business, but again, nothing is your business in a society where everything that we do has social effects. The world pays for it one way or another. We all pay for it. If you disable yourself pumping iron and you can't work, you know, there's all kinds of implications to everything. And there's just no point in saying, you know, that your preferences are immune from judgment. Because everything you do isn't immune from judgment. It all can be judged, whether this has any hope of being productive as a thing done routinely, or some substantial percentage of the population gets lost in that kind of silly behavior. You know, yeah, I don't see any point in defending it, and I also don't see any point in gulagging people for it. So I don't know what exactly, again, what are you obliging me to do? To say I either execute these people or I subsidize them? I don't have any choices in between. I can't just say, God, fuck you, asshole, and leave it at that. I can't just say fuck you to assholes. Alright, even if the preference happens to be shaped by various vicarious cultural norms, or is later overturned, as long as the subject with the preference can be said to be of sound mind, the preference stands. Sound mind, I guess, is the key phrase there, right? Sound mind. Yeah, well, I'm just saying delusions aren't sound mind. So if they're doing something because they have some deluded projection that this is somehow going to be, that it's going to matter in their small world, or that it's going to be useful in the big world, I guess that would be the argument. Like, there's a lot of people who say, well, sports is necessary because it creates social this and teaches kids how to get along, when the facts are exactly the opposite. You know, that it teaches people to be competitive motherfucking win at all cost assholes. So that's just bullshit. Alright, so yeah, I guess that's all I got out of this. I didn't get much. So what I wrote down is first cause versus later causes, or perhaps even greater causes, but you know, there's still, whether they're greater, whether somebody is more to blame in terms of their maliciousness or even their physical interference. Again, you go with the guy who loaded the gun, in my opinion. If that guy, yeah, especially if that guy has knowledge of what loading guns means, which you're opening the door to. If the thing that happened was well within the range of the guy loading the gun to know could happen, then yeah, that's probably the fucker that should get shot with the gun. Alright, so then the only value I got out of this was my thought that, you know, like our brain has these different programs running, you know, some of them more of an emotional character, you know, more tied to our own sensibilities, you know, our own, I like blue more than I like green kind of crap, and then we have these other, you know, programs that are these collections of concepts, you know, that we've tied together in a thing that's almost like an electron. You know, it's a collection, and it has a theme to it, a principle tied to it, like, you know, first do no harm, or, you know, ultimately, all that's going to matter is, the enemy is suffering itself, not the individuals who cause it or manifest it. Just like we have those things inside of us in terms of depending on, what kind of day we're having, all this kind of stuff, different themes will be stronger or weaker. Different trains of thought will be more likely to roll around in our conscious awareness. What's going on subconsciously, who knows? But anyway, I was thinking that that's sort of like how we are as individuals to this social brain. That each of us has we're like the programs of the social brain, and some just like you can have dissidence in your own brain. You can have conflicting thoughts that are saying, I want, and at the same time saying, ooh, but I recognize danger. You can recognize these two things, that you're hungry, but that there's you don't want to steal the food. That whatever the conflict would be. There's conflict in our, what we're doing in terms of individuals fighting for causes and fighting for themes in society. And so, my program's just basically saying, look, let's make sure we score the goal. That's the first priority, is to make sure we fucking score the goal. And then let's, on top of that, once we establish that this is the realm of solutions that it will create as high a certainty of success as possible, and then if we want to fight about what solution we choose, whether we do the end run or the quarterback sneak, it's okay. And I'm advocating, though, let's make sure we score the goal, and I'm going for quarterback sneak as the best plan, but that's a secondary consideration. So the fact that I would like to see, assholes have pianos fall on them is not a priority. It's just kind of first let's do the dance, and then how well we dance, who cares? But then let's worry about that. But first let's establish that we're dancing, and then we can talk about how to dance better. But I'm just saying that that the first priority is suffering's the enemy. And the second priority is, if you have to have some of it, it may be kind of cool to dump it on the assholes that created it. Yeah, that just sounds about right. Because they would have this awareness at minimum. They would be given, it just seems like a perfectly appropriate, that the mess they made have at least the minimum of creating a realization in their brain. Oh, fuck, what an asshole I was. And it's sort of just an emotional thing, I concede. There might not be any practical value to it, but I guess I'm assuming a kind of practical value, in I guess the sense that maybe if somebody we can all hear somebody going, oh shit, you were right, and you hear that, then you might be a little more cautious in your own behavior, kind of thing. So I guess I'm implying that it still has some deterrent effect, and that people will witness people under the pianos going, yeah, I shouldn't have been an asshole, and then maybe they won't be assholes. So I guess maybe there's some of that still leaking in there. But the one that's this is a long video to say a simple thing. The one that's a principle is this thing. It doesn't matter who suffers. The enemy is suffering itself. The one that's not a principle is this one where, gee, it would be nice if the assholes get what they deserve. But in a sense, deserve has nothing to do with it. And that's why the game can't be played by intelligent people, is because intelligent people don't play a game where deserve has nothing to do with it. And even when we want to make deserve have something to do with it, we probably still couldn't make deserve have something to do with it, because nobody creates their brokenness. It's created by a previous cause. and we can't get to the previous cause to prevent the previous cause. So all we can do is create the, you know, the ones that exist now. So in a sense, there is no justice. You can't really find a real criminal because there isn't one. The cause is an ignorant circumstance that goes all the way back to the DNA molecule, and it goes all the way back to the Big Bang. And the ignorance is in the function of the system itself, and you really can't punish that ignorance. You really can't do anything about it, okay, other than clean it up. And yeah, it'd be nice when you're cleaning it up if you could slap the assholes with a dirty rag, but it's not a principle, and it's not vital, and it's not even important. It's just something that seems to make whistling while we work more possible, as if we once in a while get to slap assholes with a dirty rag. Yeah, something like that. So anyway, there's no need to smash these together, and there's no need to play this contradictory statements, but they're not contradictory because they're in different circumstances describing different aspects of the circumstance. Like I said, you want to argue this one as a principle. It doesn't matter who suffers, the enemy is suffering itself. That's the principle. That's, if anything's going to be called an absolute statement, that's the absolute statement. And it's not conditional. See, he's going to play a game with this too. He's going to say, well, some people enjoy having let's say some people are more tolerant to pain than other people. Well, that's not really the point. The point is that the amount of suffering. So it doesn't matter what their tolerance is. You give them amount of discomfort. It's not how deep you stick the pin in. It's how much pain they experience. So depending on the person that's going to have the suffering, yeah, you would pinch harder because their skin is tougher. I mean, obviously you have to pinch a rhinoceros a lot harder than you'd have to pinch a platypus, okay, for it to feel the same amount of discomfort. So if you're going to say, well, let's just put all the pinches on things that have tough skin, well, I'm all for that, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the amount of suffering. We're not talking about what causes the suffering in terms of the actual mechanism of suffering. We're talking about the conscious experience. So we're talking about the brain reaction, not the skin reaction, not the sensitivity. So we're just talking about the end product, which is an amount of discomfort. So that, it doesn't matter who has it. But, you know, don't pretend that I don't understand that rhinoceroses have thicker skin. I'm not talking about what causes the suffering. I'm talking about the actual mental realization of it as a discomfort, a level of discomfort. So this is going to be really tedious, but anyway, we'll see. There might be something. Maybe we'll see what happens. So till next time.